What's up, y'all? It's Shuffle, and today I am joined by the fantastic Tyler Sigman and Chris Bourassa, the co-founders, Red Hook Studios, the brains behind the operations, who just launched the Binding Blade DLC this week, which you can pick up on Steam and Epic. And they've been nice enough to grant us an interview. So, how y'all doing?
Great. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, good to see you.
Cool. All right, so the first general icebreaker question here is, how are the two of you? I know it's been busy, but how are you feeling personally?
Just in general?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty good.
You're like, is this game related, or am I supposed to actually
No,
be a
that's
person?
later.
How much do you want to know? No, it was great to finish the year with the DLC release, and there weren't any crazy disasters or 11th hour problems that can sometimes happen. I think we got it out to our test groups early enough that a lot of the kind of weirdness things that pop up were exposed, and so I think the launch was pretty good, and it's been great to just get two products out in 1 year, especially this year, given how crazy it's been.
Yeah,
so,
honestly,
feeling pretty good. Looking forward to a break, but
Yeah, and today's kind of fun because actually we have our holiday Christmas party tomorrow, or holiday party, and Red Hook is about maybe 2/3 in Vancouver and 1/3 scattered all over the world. And we have almost the entire team here for the party, and they have all been arriving last night. So today we're doing a big team lunch. That'll be fun. So it's actually the first time that some of us have actually met in person. So that's really fun. So there's a good energy in the office right now, and yeah, getting the Binding Blade out kind of puts us in good position to actually have a holiday break, which is nice, and everybody needs it. So.
Got people coming in like, oh, I saw you in the email CC chain. It's good to see a face.
I just met our build engineer in person for the first time because we hired him during the deep pandemic, and he's been awesome.
Oh yeah.
But you never know how tall people are. You never know.
I know. I was gonna say it's always I thought you were different physically than you are.
Yeah.
I don't know why that's so. Yeah, Zoom is. You never know.
Yeah, someone walks in, they're like 7'14". You're like, okay, I guess that's it.
Yeah.
All right.
Or they're like an Oompa Loompa, and you just okay.
The obligatory. Oh, you must have played basketball in high school.
I know. I'm sure every tall person gets that question.
I know.
All right. So my next get to know you thing, because I'm really curious about both of these, is Tyler. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're a pilot.
Oh yeah, I'm a hobby pilot, as they say. Private pilot.
Yeah. How did that happen?
Pilot for fun. Pilot. Oh, I loved airplanes. There was a time in my life when I loved airplanes more than games, I think. I'm not sure. Or at least maybe equally much. And yes, when I was growing up, I saw Top Gun. I was like, man, I want to play volleyball, have a 6-pack, and fly F-14s.
Was it the volleyball or the hot friend that you wanted?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and I've managed to be 0 out of 3 on those, but I do fly small planes. And yeah, no, I got my pilot's license at the end of university, and worked as an aircraft engineer for a while, and still love airplanes a lot. But kind of the path of doing it for a living, kind of combination of didn't materialize in the way that I wanted, because I was like, I only want to fly F-16s. I don't want to fly 737s. Yeah. That seems boring as hell. And so when I didn't go to the military, I was like, well, I'm gonna figure out something else to do with my life, and here I am, started a company with Chris.
Yeah, just making video games. That's the natural progression. One avenue closes, then you just go to game design.
Honestly, it was a little bit of realizing I love making games even more than being around airplanes, but I still, I really love flying.
Okay. Do you fly into the office?
No, but partially, it's actually a bummer because I live in the States and the office is in Canada, and so it's just harder with literally if the office was in Seattle, yeah, I could.
Oh wow.
But in theory I could, but it's just a whole big hassle of customs and all these other things and getting the right paperwork, and I do enough paperwork at work. I don't want to.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Next question I got for Chris is, when are we going to see more Gundam models on the Twitter?
I hit the Gundams pretty hard in the pandemic.
Yeah.
It's a little embarrassing. I I saw this other artist on Twitter post a Gundam, and I was like, what the hell is that? That's so cool. And he's like, you don't need glue. And then I went to the hobby store, and then yeah, for 2 years, I think I built about 207 Gundams. It was a lot, and so I think I'm taking a break. But I switched over to Warhammer because my son got really into that. So I was like, oh, we can paint some miniatures, but it's such a bigger process because I wouldn't paint the Gundams like. I know some people do amazing like custom airbrush jobs and stuff on them, but for me, it was just a way of hanging out in the living space around the kids but not having to just sit there inert and wait for my life to end. So the painting with Warhammer is like a little bit more involved. You got to get all the like stuff out, and so I don't do it as often. I don't know, but the short answer is probably no more Gundams for a little while. Like I've had to recycle Gundams. Like one day I was like in my recycling bin, I put like a bunch of built Gundams, and I'm like,
oh wow,
you're gonna be pop bottles now, like because it's too many. I had too many Gundams.
You could have sold them on,
That's what I don't know.
With your name, probably like, oh, Chris Bourassa's Etsy shop.
Oh yes, right. A moderately successful video game artist.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like Gundams built okay from a world-class concept artist.
Yeah,
like not world-class Gundam, but
not even world-class concept artist.
I was really glad when he started building. I was like, oh my god, everyone, Chris has a hobby. This is great. But I didn't know you went that hard. 200 is a lot. Like
it's a lot of Gundams.
Like 18 is I got into Gundams. Like
yeah, I left that behind like week 2.
Start getting the plastic together, making your own Gundam models.
I could. I still have unbuilt Gundam models at home, so there's a chance I could come back.
Nice. Just some Frankenstein model comes out of the house one day.
Yeah.
Is Gundam and Gundam is a brand, or is Gunpla is it general, or is it like Kleenex and tissue, or are they different?
That's a good question.
Well,
I don't know.
Gundam is the name of the particular
mobile suit Gundam
of the mobile suit. A Gundam uses better materials than your average mobile suit.
Okay.
But Gunpla is what they call the plastic building of the thing.
Okay, that makes sense. I appreciate.
I'm not a big fan of the word Gunpla. I try not to use it.
It's because it's Gunplay or Gunpla, or it's
I've seen a Gunpla.
I don't like words that you're not sure how to say. At
the end of the day, I built too many Gundams. I got too deep.
Fair. All right. My final icebreaker question is: have there been any games you've been enjoying? Video game, tabletop, whatever, in whatever free time you may or may not have.
Yeah, I got Starfield.
Okay.
Realized I expected Bethesda kind of overall jankiness, but realized that I was having no fun at all and picked up Everspace 2 because I was like, I still kind of want some space action. And then I got super into that. It's an excellent game. And so I beat that. And I think that was my biggest like gaming achievement this year.
Nice. Tyler, any games?
Yeah. Lately, I've actually been going a little, getting back into like classic roguelikes, like ASCII, like Angband in particular. I got, did a little more NetHack, a little Moria, a little classic rogue, and then some Angband. And I had like read a book about kind of the history of how they were all developed, and then the lineage. Because I was always a little like I played some of these growing up, but I was always a little confused, like what came first and all this stuff. So other than Rogue, which and so I'm playing some ASCII stuff, and I got a good run going right now. I just got this dagger called Nimthank, which is I'm on like level 5.
Is it the letter I? Like that's the dagger? It's just you got a sweet lowercase I.
But it's crazy. It's like +9 to hit, +12 damage, and I'm like,
still just a letter.
I Googled it, and someone's like, "Oh, that's very good. That'll carry you, for at least 20 levels or whatever." So now I have that tension that the fun of a roguelike where you're like, I got it this time. This one's got to count. And, so that's kind of fun to re-experience that.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. That's, the beauty of the roguelite genre is, you can lose stuff, and then losing's not like the end. You can just pick it back up and try something different and have a different experience.
Yeah, and the spikiness of like trying some runs, just bad luck, or just nothing happens, and then suddenly you like stuff click, you get the right gear, whatever, and you're like, oh, this is a run now. Like
Yeah.
I love that feeling.
Yeah, same. All right. Going into the work related questions. So the first one is, since you two made the first Darkest Dungeon with a more smaller, close knit group, what's it been like making a sequel and having to like step back and become like more like delegate more responsibilities and manage teams and stuff? And I guess the relationship between you two with that.
That's a massive question.
Yeah, and we
Okay,
have to
take bits and
we
pieces.
have to
I'm
say
sorry.
we have to say it's incredible because everyone's in the office right now. So
Yeah.
it's been absolutely incredible. Just kidding. It has been great though.
It was a tough development cycle, I think, on Darkest Dungeon 2. But not because like the team is great, but one of the things that makes our studio a little bit different is that Tyler and I never had any aspirations to hire ourselves out of a job.
Makes sense.
So, we're on the hook to do very real, very tangible, often a lot of development work. And I think that's kind of the weakness, that we've stumbled on, but we found success through our collaboration and our individual contributions to Darkest Dungeon. So we didn't want to like change that recipe. We wanted to, maintain a close connection to the actual product. And then when you scale up and you have the expectations and needs of a bigger team around you, how do you find time to do both? And you can, it's just very tiring and difficult. So I think that was like one of the biggest things that we kind of struggled with over the course of making DD2, because we didn't want it to lose that like the personal touch that we felt like was really important. But at the same time, you want to empower team members to like find, bring their own ideas to the table and make space for that. But it was a bit of a balancing act.
Interesting. And I understand it would be a challenge, so it's good to get the insight on that. And I guess, from your side, you have like the art team and the narrative and stuff, and then Tyler's doing like mechanical stuff, I imagine. So I guess, what was it, the similar experience, or was it something different for you?
Compared to DD1?
Yeah, I guess, taking that
Mhm.
step back and
Mhm.
quote, hiring yourself out of a job type of thing.
Yeah. It's definitely like you have to keep your focus on what is best for the game. And I think sometimes that actually means giving up some things you like to do. And that is hard. And like Chris said, we really don't want to give up everything we'd like to do. But, going from 5 to 10 people to now we're close to 30 there's just more operational stuff that someone has to do.
Yeah.
And Chris and I also like don't want to outsource all that in a way that like we want to shape the company culture and stuff like that too. So you do find yourself split, but I think that where you get some joy out of it. So yeah, it's hard like to maybe not touch some of the parts of the game that I touched in the first one, but where you take some joy is like getting the right people in there and them doing something really cool and being like, wow, that's awesome. And I'm glad they did that. And I couldn't have done that. Like a certain amount of creativity on skills or items or whatever it is. Yeah. And so you just kind of have to shift some of your, some of where you take the satisfaction and pride, but at the same time, anytime, and I know Chris feels the same way, anytime we haven't been like hands-on in the game, it's not good if we feel bad, like it's not as fun. And so you're just kind of trying to strike this balance where you're staying plugged in to the game on a real like small level, because sometimes a game is the culmination of all the little decisions too, but then occasionally we got to like deal with company stuff. So yeah, it's a juggle. But I mean, the cool thing is like, look at what this team built, this team of 25 people.
Because we're capable of more, right? Like with a bigger team, you can do more. You can aim for a higher bar in terms of like presentation or scope or anything like that. So it's kind of wonderful to see that kind of come together. And it's also great for motivation because, when things get tough, you can, like Tyler said, you see something that like a teammate contributed to the game. You're like, oh, wow, like that looks really incredible. That gives me an idea for something else. And you can kind of get that creative ball rolling, and it has an impact across multiple people, which, raises the quality of work across the bar. So
I believe it. It's always good to feel like you have, people you can rely on. You're not just out there by yourself. So it shows too, because obviously the game has a lot of improvements from the first one. Not that the first one was no slouch, but you can definitely see the evolution as a studio, I feel.
And we should really, be explicit in giving the team their credit and their due right here, and thank them for all their hard work and their dedication to the project, because they work just as hard as us.
Oh, I know. Like I just grabbed you two because you're at the top, but there's like 6 other people I would not mind talking to in there that I know. So it is what it is. All right. Next easier question, I promise, is X hero when? And is anyone deconfirmed?
X hero when?
X hero, so Houndmaster, Arbalest,
oh right,
Abomination, whatever.
I mean, something that came up kind of on our little stream that we did on Sunday before the release is, I think when people think about it, like, the community, everyone has their favorites, right? Yeah, there are people who are huge Houndmaster stands, and there's obviously, Crusader stands and all these other. And I think that was one of the hardest things, and Chris can talk to it a lot, because I know he agonized about this a lot at the beginning of this project, but it wasn't as simple as us saying, let's just take everybody, because like there's a limited amount of resources that we have to build everybody. And so every cut that was hard. And every hero from game one has people that would love to see them back, including us, but we also want to make new stuff. And so that's not an easy those aren't easy decisions, which is kind of maybe a dodge to your question, other than to say, it's like so much on our side when we haven't brought someone or done something, like there's an anguish on our side too, because we're like, I'd really like to get that hero in there. So really there's no such thing as a painless opportunity cost here.
I believe it.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work to make a hero, especially in Darkest Dungeon 2. And maybe we should have stripped them down and only had half as many skills and not done backstories, and then they would have been cheaper to make or faster to make. But we really wanted to make this game about those stories and about those heroes, and so they're central content. They take a significant amount of time from a large group of people to come together. So yeah, like when we sat down to do the DD2 roster, I did a poll. I polled our studio. I looked online for some anecdotal, like, what are some of the favorites? We thought about like design roles, like what do we have to have in there? Like if everybody just wants Crusader, Leper, whoever else, and then we had the back row is sadly abandoned. But it was tough to cut, because like I'm really proud of like all of the cast of DD1. I think they're all really neat characters, so it wasn't like gleeful to not include them. That said, character X when, I can't give you an answer on that. I think just get out there and enjoy the Crusader and the Duelist. God, just play with what you have for a little while, and hopefully rest assured that for us, we would love to continue to grow the game. That's where our focus is on. Next year is entirely on enriching this game and making it the best it can be, and that takes a lot of different forms. We can talk about that maybe later on, but we're certainly aware of how impactful characters are. That's why we wanted to do 2 of them before embarking on something like mod support or some of the other community requested features that we haven't been able to get to, is because we felt like growing that hero roster, growing that pool would exponentially increase the amount of like interesting choices and builds that you could make, party comps that you could make. So we recognize the value of them for sure.
Yeah, and I can agree with that too. I think ultimately, at least with Binding Blade, it was the right decision, because I've always enjoyed the game personally, but the moment we get 2 new characters, like that's a couple hundred extra hours right there just messing with them. So it was really nice to get something like that.
Yeah, and I think like maybe people who aren't as familiar with kind of just how things are built, be like, well, you have a bigger team. Why couldn't you have just brought every character from DD1? I mean, it's Chris and I did this calculation again recently, but it's like an order of magnitude more work to do a hero in DD2 than 1, just because of the 2D to 3D, the 7 skills to 11 paths, which didn't exist in DD1, and the hero stories and signature items and all these things. And so it's a massive amount more work, and that's why it wasn't as easy as just saying, cool, let's recreate every hero right away. But we want to do all that stuff. I mean, Chris and I are still like we love the idea of the hero stories, and we never really wavered on that during development, but it came at a huge cost in terms of like what it takes. But we felt like it was important to portray the heroes in that way and let you like see their whole story in an interactive way. And I remain super glad we did. So yeah, it's a little hard like to crank them out as it were.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand. That's just, that's one of the questions I got the most. So I figured, just
sure.
get it on the record.
We get that internally.
Yeah.
Like, are we doing another set of heroes? Like,
all right. The next one is related. You guys already alluded to it, but a viewer named Noon6 asked, what is the timeline for a hero? I guess from concept to what their role is to playable.
Well, it's a great question. It can take anywhere from a week to 2 weeks to cook up like a visual character design, and usually along with that there's some kind of discussion of roles, but it's pretty high level. So let's use the duelist for example. It's like, we can someone really dancy, we want to make sure there's fourth rank viability, but to pair with the Crusader, we felt like it was a cool, like they're both, their swords are really important to them, so we thought that was like a nice fit. A couple weeks to do some design, visual iteration, settle on a design. So that's one character that takes 15 days approximately to model. It needs to be rigged, it needs to be animated, visual effects need to be added. We need all the skill entries to be done in the meantime so that the animators can plug that data in. So we need to some progress on the design side of like standing up the skill entries. Then we need her origin skin. We need a backstory character. Those follow the same model production all the way through, like design, modeling, texturing, rigging, animating, visual effects, all the way down the line. We need icons for all their skills and for all their altar of hope stuff, which is 2-3 weeks of UI time. We need backgrounds for each of their origin story fights. That's a couple of weeks of environment art time. We need a script for their little 5-part horror story. That's probably about 2 weeks of writing, refinement, editing. That gets sent to Wayne. Hopefully we get that back before the due date. And what am I missing? Then we need an audio pass on the whole thing. Yeah, no, I'm gonna pass it to you. I'm giving you like the content, and then you can fill it in. Then we need art for all of the trinkets and the signature items. That's about a week. And I think that's about the total scope of content related to a hero.
It sounds like
I'm
3 months?
I'm wrong. Weapon kits and pallets. And that's the weapon kits are probably a month or so to make, and the pallets are about a couple of days, maybe 2-3 days.
That's crazy. Okay.
Well, they got to get concepted, modeled, rigged, textured, tested, adjusted in game to make sure that we limit crashing, that they look good, the proportions are solid, that kind of thing. So it's iterative, right? But that's about the scale of it. So I would say it takes, on the order of, like 2-3 months to make all that content. But I mean, the way a waterfall schedule works is like you finish modeling the duelist, you start modeling the Crusader, then the duelist begins to move through her rigging and animation. So it all kind of like cascades down. But we started this DLC in the summer.
Okay. Very insightful.
Yeah, and so on the kind of implementation side is, the kit could take a week or two just to try to come up with the skill ideas, and there's iterations. So it's like you're going to come up with the ideas, kind of figure out how you want to work together. Then you have to implement, actually hook them up. Then, there's all the testing related to that. And then one of the paths in the hero stories are what really add time. Like just doing the kits is actually not that bad, because like we did a lot of that in DD1, and making them interesting is hard, and 11 skills versus 7 is obviously a challenge. But I think the the stories and the paths are some of the areas that are like hardest to estimate. The stories in particular, because it's like, okay, we kind of work with Chris on like what the story is, and then take the Crusader as a good example. You're like, how do we make an interesting set piece tactical thing about harvesting wheat?
Yeah.
And sometimes it comes really easy, and other times it's really challenging, and you go through iterations. So those things to actually like concept, implement, and refine can take anywhere from 1 to like 4 weeks each. It really just depends on like how it went. I would say usually maybe like 2 weeks each. And then the paths, are as the game has gone on, we've tried to like doing more and more and more with the paths. When they first came out, it's like this does more range damage.
Sharp shot does more damage.
Yeah, and even that was neat. But then like we had this whole like kind of palette of colors available to us that we wanted to really paint. So so that takes some effort. And then what we do really well on DD2 that we didn't do on DD1 is a lot of private tests where we get people to try things out. Because like that gives us a chance to iterate and try to make a better product by the time it comes out to people. But that does take time. It's like, so by the time we do all this stuff Chris talked about, we're ready to test it out. And either it lands and people are like, this is great, or they're like, we hate this, or this doesn't work, or whatever. And then we want to, go through. So sometimes that could be a week or it could be a month. And some of this does happen in parallel, like Chris said. So, ultimately kind of like this DLC took the better part of the entire team for 3 months, and then other parts of the team for a little bit of time before that. So it's, unfortunately it's like not quite as quick to turn them around as on DD1, but at the same time we're doing more stuff with it, and I hope people really appreciate that.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Again, appreciate all of the insightful stuff. And
well, you got the entire board of directors here, so
yeah, true. I mean, if you guys can't answer, it's like, oh, let's talk to our supervisor who's in an office that doesn't exist. Yeah,
we should give some shout outs to the test groups that we have. They've been an incredible resource for us, and just a very great civil, fun, positive discussion. Even when it's critiques, it's not always good news that we read from them in Discord, but it's always framed in a way that's really healthy, and it's a lot of fun to engage with. So thanks, guys.
Yeah, that's a good call, Chris. And it really makes the game better.
Yeah.
And there's a fun element for us too. And Michaela, who came on as our community manager, she's been doing a great job wrangling all those with John. And it's a lot of tireless work for sure. And I think, the testers, the thing that blows my mind is like, it's not always fun. It's that old kind of like people think, oh, game testing must always be great. It's like, no, you're getting in there. Something might be broken. It might eat your save file. Like, there's all kinds of things that happen. And the fact that people are willing to go through that, to get a little bit of, hopefully they really enjoy the behind the scenes and get to see how the sausage is made. But it's real work, and we appreciate it.
I explained it to my son the other day, because he's like, you can just play games all day and that can be, like your job. And I'm like, no. Imagine this: every time you use your sword, the sword disappears. Okay, is it the sword? Is it the character holding the sword? That particular enemy? Is it every enemy on that level, or is it something about the level? And you have to figure out, like, work it back and isolate where the problem is from. So it's not always like just chilling.
Oh yeah, for sure. And if I wasn't under NDA, I've got some stories, but I have to wait.
Wait till we keel over, and then you can do your tell-all.
Yeah,
exactly.
Release the.
All right, Red Hook dissolves as a company in the year 3001, and then I'll be able to tell everything finally.
I'll take that. You could tell whatever you want in 3001.
All right. I guess the next big question between the two of you is that what's the team looking to do for the future in terms of, like, I guess, content? Like what should we expect? A lot of people ask for regions. I know we talked about heroes, but different difficulties, game modes, and stuff. Is there anything that you guys can share about the future?
Yeah, there's going into next year. Our kind of philosophy is there's two rails that we want to take. The first one is maintaining and polishing the game that we have. So that looks like, and Tyler can speak to this more, but hero balance tweaks, path update stuff, mod support related kind of things, quality of life, potentially some other stuff that I'll leave for him, but kind of just blowing on that fire and keeping it nice and healthy and warm for the community. And the second kind of focus in the meantime is going to be creating a significant expansion and update to the game that introduces some new stuff. So we're splitting our time a little bit between this larger initiative and kind of some of the maintenance, improvement, quality of life stuff. As time goes on, more and more people will join that expansion initiative. And that's what Tyler and I have spent the last couple of weeks like really hammering out. We're super excited about it. But we're not gonna like discuss it just yet. I will say this before I pass it off. It's an interesting problem to think about growing the game, because if you've beaten it like you have like several times, maybe I think you've beat the game, right?
Yeah, once or twice.
Okay, yeah. You had to use the radiant. You had to use the radiant torch, though, right?
I did. I had to wait till it was like level 3 just to make it, manageable.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you got there in the end. But for someone who's gone through that content and beaten those final bosses and is looking for like kind of that end game grind or like a never-ending experience, adding a new region doesn't fundamentally change what we feel like it could result in fatigue. So you get the new DLC, it's however much money, you get a new region with a new layer boss and a bunch of new loot. You'll do a few runs for sure, right? You'll check out the new monsters. You'll learn how to beat them up. You'll beat a couple of the bosses you already know how to beat, and that'll kind of be it. So we're looking at it through a different lens of how can we really enrich and grow the experience beyond just getting people back for a couple of runs against some new monsters. Will we have new monsters? Most assuredly. So definitely some content for sure, but that's a little bit of insight in terms of like how we're thinking about growing the game.
Okay.
Yeah, the community, we listen a lot, and we also live and breathe this game and have for 4.5 years, which is an incredible amount of time. I can't believe how much has passed. And so we're kind of acutely aware of where we think it's really doing what we want to do, and some areas where like people are, would love to see more of or whatever. And like Chris said, I think we want people to be able to play it in different ways and really enjoy themselves. And like, we're not like the hot thing in the game industry these days is like making a game that can eat your entire life. We don't really look at it like that. It's more that we want there to be great reasons to play and people to feel like their time was well spent. We don't really come at it from the aspect of like, oh, we want to suck you into the darkest dungeon ecosystem and never let you go.
Yeah.
That's not how we play games. Like, we want to play different things, whatever. And I think one thing that's really cool about DD2 is just that like you can have that full experience. You can go through the 5-act story. And one of our design goals when we did it was that you should be able to get through that faster than beating the darkest dungeon in the original darkest dungeon. Like, obviously pros like yourself, you guys can kind of burn through it, but a lot of the average player sometimes takes 80, 100, 120 hours in DD1.
Yeah.
And we know there's a lot of grind in there. So we actually tried really hard to reduce some of that in DD2. And I think now the average player in DD2, it's probably like 50, 60 hours, somewhere around there to like see all 5-act bosses, assuming some amount of failure, whatever. And I think in some ways, like in this day and age, that's cool. But we also do love the world, and we know that people, especially those that came from DD1, they kind of want that experience of being able to like, hey, if I want to put 500 hours in here, I want to be able to do it. And I know people do and have, like yourself. But what we want to make sure is like there's interesting ways to maybe go about that. So like Chris is kind of talking about, how do we add variety and interest and new experiences without it just being dependent on seeing a new face in the game, although that's part of it. Like, we want it to be a multi-pronged approach, kind of like Chris was saying. So like doing this DLC felt like the right thing. It's like, because adding a hero is like, combinatoric type thing. We're like, okay, 2 new heroes adds a lot of different comps that you can do now. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
And we like doing that stuff, and we'll probably do more. But we also want to like also look structurally at some bigger things too. So we're actually super pumped about it. The team doesn't even really know what we're doing yet, so we're not gonna share it with you. But
yeah, straight up, like we haven't really
it's
talked
fair.
to the. Yeah,
but they've been busy. They've been working on.
They worked hard, and we want to give it Christmas break and not have to worry about the next thing. So we'll kick it off in January.
But we really hope. I guess the big thing is like people should look forward to a big year in 2024 for Darkest Dungeon 2. Base game stuff Chris talked about, consoles, and new exciting big DLC that we plan to get out in 2024. We won't, we'll know more here. But so I think like, one thing I've seen just, odd comments here and there is just, people saying like, oh, now that the game's out, I wonder if they're done. It's like, no. One of the things that DD1 taught us is just like the incredible depth of the community and what a game can do in the long tail if it has people that want to play it. And so, we believe that like DD2 has a lot of good road ahead of it. And so that's our 2024 objective, is to kind of like really see where we can go.
Yeah, put simply, our entire team that made the game is remaining on the game.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a live ops team. We're not, scaling back and pursuing another project just yet. So it's the full studio effort is going into it.
That makes sense. And as always, good news. I'm sure everyone's happy about that. And just between like, this is my own commentary, but between like the DLCs for like DD1 and like the mod support, for instance, like people are still making mods and doing challenge runs and stuff for the game like 7.5, almost 8 years later. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's special. It's cool. I mean, it's like it still blows our mind, and that we kind of like bottled lightning with that thing, and we still love it too. And one of the hardest parts for us was when we started DD2 is like we were still a pretty small studio. I think we were like 10 people at that point, and we didn't have the ability to keep doing DD1 stuff and start a new game. And we felt like it had already been quite a while, and the game had been out a few years. We'd done 4 DLCs, and we're like, okay, it's time we got to start something else. But unfortunately, we weren't big enough to try to do too many things at once, and we were pretty hesitant. I think this remains like everything has an opportunity cost, but something I think Chris and I have managed to do fairly well with Red Hook up to this point. Knock on, I think this is laminate, but whatever, we'll call it wood.
Oh,
is
laminate is one wood, so
okay, well, true, but I mean, it could be like plastic. Who knows? Is not trying to do too many things, right? And so, but yeah, I love seeing the life that game still has. It's really wonderful.
Good. I'm sure the fans of that game and both games are definitely happy to hear that. And the good part is too, just asking that question, I had like some more specifics, but y'all just knocked out like 3 or 4 of them with that. So fantastic job.
Good.
Sweet.
All right.
We can feel them coming.
Yeah. Then all right. Got some individual questions before our fantastic lightning round. The first is for Chris from Swid Rosmigo 9325. Excellent name. And they're asking,
that's catchy. I think when he was born, his mother just knew what to call him.
It just rolls right off the tongue. So they're asking, since we see Barks and Hero Shrine lore and stuff like that, are we gonna find other ways to learn more about the connections the characters have outside of that and what they think of each other? Because obviously we know their past, and some of them have a little history like Reynold and Dismas, but are we going to see like, what Occultist thinks of Plague Doctor? Because if I'm correct, they're both, learned people. So
what they think of each other changes run to run.
Oh, the affinity
between ends.
That's kind of the game. So I would hesitate to like canonize a certain type of relationship in a game where a central mechanic is the volatility of relationships. And that's not me being evasive. It just, if the grave robber is company like, line. I think, the leper is just stupid, and then they fall in love in your run. It's a little bit counterintuitive, I guess. Will there be like more lore and kind of world building, or how the characters relate to the world? Definitely. I had a great time doing the Crusader quest, and that was just
Oh
like
yeah.
kind of a little experiment, really. It started as kind of just an idea to like pace out the DLC so that you get the duelist, you get to play, do her hero shrines, learn about her skills. Meanwhile, your run is mutated a little bit, and by the timing, and I'm glad it worked out. But the idea was that by the time you finish all the duelists' shrines and wrap up that run, you have unlocked the Crusader, and then you can start that process with him, as opposed to just here's 2 heroes out of the box, go nuts. And it was also like more fun to kind of like trump up the Crusader's return because of how important he was to so many people in the community. So that was a neat little experiment. It allowed us to like get some more lore in the game and tell a little bit of a story. So it's definitely front of mind as we move into our big thing for next year. So there will be more lore.
Oh, fantastic. And I'm sure you guys have seen it too, but already with the quest system, people are already saying, like, can we get quests for, new stuff, this stuff, new characters, whatever. So
Yeah.
I think it was an experiment that really paid off. It's been well received, at least from what I've seen.
Yeah, I've only seen people speak positively about it, which is just, it was so much fun to actually, like, that was one of my favorite moments actually of the past year of development, is just working with the team on that initiative, just because it was like fun, it was small, so it was kind of like an intimate, quick process, and we had the technology with the items to do it. So I thought it was great, and I was really happy to see that people enjoyed it too. So we'll do more of that stuff.
Fantastic. All right. Tyler, you're on the hot seat next, and let's see. Let me get a good one here. Okay, I like this one. So Empty Mimic 5976 asks, how does the team...
Love the name.
Yep.
So good.
I was surprised how many people have numbers in their name when I was scrolling through the
How
requests.
many empty mimics are there? It's amazing.
I mean, isn't an empty mimic like a paradox or an oxymoron too? But
I mean, I just love Mimic as an old school D&D player. It's great.
yeah, I don't know if you saw, there was someone made a mimic mod for DD1, and it's exactly what you think. Sometimes the heirloom chest just turns into a monster, and it's a
That's really
rather
good.
tough encounter.
That's awesome.
I don't know if we saw that. That's great.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So this person's asking, I think this is a great question, and it's, how does the team conceive the boss mechanics, more of the puzzle ones, like Harvest Child, with the hunger, or Seething Sigh with the breath tokens?
Yeah. One thing I think that makes Red Hook, well, I shouldn't say unique, because lots of companies design different ways. Let me better say it, is our design process is to really closely marry theme and mechanic. And that might sound obvious, but it's not. There's definitely like successful designers, studios, whatever we're talking, whether it's board games or video games or whatever, that are kind of like mechanic first, and some are theme first, but then the mechanic kind of just gets like, plopped on or whatever, and some are a mix. And Chris and I have always felt like we do better when it's like really closely trying to marry that. And the way that works in practice, I think, is like not trying to have most of the time the mechanic is not in mind until we have an idea of what we're looking at. And then you start trying, this could work like this or this. There are occasional times where there's kind of like a mechanic that seems so cool that you're like, okay, now how do we dress it up? But so usually the process is Chris goes wild with some weird idea that he comes up with visually, and then we start talking about what that might look like. And so, yeah, like the lungs, I think, is an interesting one where, it could be a dragon, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so, that allowed us to do a Darkest Dungeon dragon, which is friggin' weird, an esophagus and lungs. It's creepy. It's strange. And so I think the process is there, but I think the puzzle part and the mechanics sometimes do get hard, because it's also got to be fun and interesting. And I think sometimes they kind of come and seem to work pretty well. Like I think like the Locks boss, comparatively, the brain, it was very challenging, and one of the most complex ones to make initially, especially from like the art pipeline, all this, where we had like the brain, but he's not actually a monster, and each lock is actually the actor. But as far as mechanically, it was like crunchy and interesting, and didn't take quite as much iteration. Whereas like the eyeball boss for us, oh man, we've been through some stuff,
Yeah.
But that's kind of the process, right? Like when you're doing, because when I think back now, between DD1 and DD2, I mean, we're up to dozens of interesting set piece bosses that we've made.
True.
Yeah.
Right? It's got to be, right? Or I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, if we went through and
yes.
counted, it's at least, maybe 15, 20, something
15,
like that.
right? So,
it's got to be more than that. There's like
I'm sure it is.
Yeah, there's tons of
depends
bosses.
whether you're counting like you're right. Sorry, then Crimson Court and everything else. So it's kind of natural that some are going to just like click and then some are going to take some work. And so it's an iterative process ultimately. But I think that like at least I can just speak for like my side of design is like, it's really fun to look at badass concept art and then be like, okay, like what would it do? And then Chris also though thinks about design up front too. And so when he's concepting stuff, he's not just thinking, does this look cool? In his head, he's already thinking, oh, I wonder if we could do this, but the earlier, the better that we get involved in that is usually good, but it's collaborative and iterative. And ultimately, I think the sign of success is when like the visuals and theme or the mechanic and the theme work together. So like, we still think about like the hag boss from DD1 and how fun that was, because like,
I think that was the first boss that we arrived at where we're like, this is unconventional, it's exciting, it was really great to build. And so like that was kind of like when from a character design standpoint, like the leper who did or the plague doctor, we're like, okay, that's like a new, at the time before the plague doctor explosion of 2018 or whatever, we were ahead of the curve. So the hag boss was definitely one of those ones. And what that handoff looks like is like, we could do like, I'm like, okay, we could do this witch, and oh my god, like what if you could put somebody in the pot? And then Tyler's like, okay, well, how would we put them in the pot? And we'll think, well, the pot will be too slot. Well, then the pot will move. We can't have the pot move. And we kind of work through how that works. It was the same for the DD2 bosses. Like, I want to put a kid in a cornucopia. Like, what's the big deal? I want you to have to eat the kid.
Is horrifying.
Like, yeah.
And then so like they're
tempting meat, something you eat the meat and it makes you crazy. And then like that's the concept. And then we talk through, okay, how we're going to structure this into like an actual gameplay experience.
Yeah. Did you have anything else to add to that, Tyler? I felt like you had something else.
I was just gonna, I mean, he kind of said there, and like some of it, what's fun about like, the hag was an example there too of, can we do this? Like, can we just plop a character out of their party and then of course, like, how do we show it? Well, we can't, because back then we're like hand drawing everything, so I think it's the feet, right?
Oh, it's just the hands sticking up.
Oh, the hands. Sorry, the hands. Yeah. And so
universal hands.
And hopefully people go like, wait, Mike, this character was gloved, and this one, it doesn't matter. They kind of go with
it.
In the
pot. Nothing matters once you're in the pot.
Yeah. And then, but mechanically that's fun. It's like, well, how does it work? How long did they stay? Like, what so there's a lot of things to work out. Like, what is the damage? Is it just a damage threshold of like, and then what happens if you just focus fire the pod? And but that's like normal design problems, right? Is like, how do you make something interesting and fun? And I think like it's a really fun process for us because the results are exciting for us too, right? Like when you're doing a normal monster, it's still fun, but when you do these big set pieces and then you get to just see, I mean, just look at I don't want to totally spoil the DD2 final boss. Like we can spoil DD1 final boss, but obviously it's out there and people can watch, but I don't know if everyone's seen it. And man, it gets crazy. And so that's really fun for us to see the end result too. And when it works, and so it's one of the coolest parts mechanically of working on this game is the bosses for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I think the player experience, I'm not going to spoil exactly what happens, but like the main final boss mechanic in the first game, it always catches everyone off guard the first time. And then something similar happens in the second game. And anyone that played the first game was like, oh no, not again, please. I'm not having this. But then
I think everywhere we can subvert expectations is always the most exciting for me. So whether it's stealing your character and drowning them, or
siren them to the other side,
deleting them, or the siren pulls them to the other side, or then making people think they're going to get deleted but do something different. I think that's where making Darkest Dungeon is always the most exciting for me, is when we can do things where people are like, what? Like the Leviathan hand coming up in the second round. Like the first time that happens is like a really cool moment. Because you're like, wait, what? It's not just a head. Like, that's the good stuff.
Yeah, and I suppose we're the only times when maybe it inverts is when we're like, okay, look, we need a burn, or we need a, and this is true with characters or monsters or whatever. We do try to be conscious of what the whole roster looks like, both enemies, whatever, and enemies, characters, etc., and look for those holes to fill. And like when Runaway came along, it was like, okay, we've got the blighter, we've got the plenty of bleeders, we need burn, in a serious way, and we plan on doing some touch-ups on her at some point. Because that is her role. She's supposed to be like the super burn, and I know like there's a little bit we can do there to refine that. But in general, when we're led by interesting ideas first, I think results in the best end result. But you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, of course. Let's see. All right, and actually just a little bit about this. I don't know if you can touch on it. But again, for you, Tyler, Edgard142 has asked, is there concern about token bloat and unique mechanics? Because as we see more things get added to the game, we see more stuff. And obviously, it's more, levers and dials to twist and stuff for you guys, but also it's more work for the player to understand.
Yeah, there's a line there. I think that the majority of the combat play space occurs with not a huge number of tokens, the big ones, right? Combo, crit, strength, dodge, block, taunt, so I think that the core space isn't too giant to be intimidating, but obviously, yeah, it's a mix between trying to add something new and interesting, and not trying to, turn the game into something it's not. And like we're not trying to be Path of Exile, and I mean that in a complimentary way. Like that game is rad for what it is, but we, as much as I love spreadsheets, Darkest Dungeon has always been, from DD1 up till now, it's always been a blend of really feel good to play, to hear, to see, to experience. When it's like Chris had an old adage, like on DD1, when you click, it needs to feel good. Like, but also we want those deep systems, right? Like, and I think that's what has made both games, is like they're beautiful and they're crunchy and interesting. So it's a line, but I think like the Duelist and Crusader to me are a good example of the Duelist. We got to experiment and we added a new, tokens, stances. I personally think it's really interesting. And but the Crusader is a little more like straightforward, but in a good way. He's versatile. But we didn't want to necessarily create a system where like both characters introduce an all new mechanic that is like you've got to learn, right? But so I think that's maybe like a great example of like us trying to thread that needle, because I think for maybe each person who might be concerned if we like add too much, there's also going to be a significant amount of our player base that is like, we want something new to have to challenge ourselves. And watching streams this week has actually been interesting, because some people absolutely love the Duelist and they love her depth and intricacy. And some people are like, man, I just want to click and hurt the enemy. And the Crusader is pretty good for that, right? So now with the roster of 14, or I forget where we're at, 14, 15. Great. You can kind of put together the party that you like. If you like setup, the Duelist is a pretty cool character for that. If you like ways of finding really interesting ways for her to pair, like with, and help enemies and set up these big attacks. If you just want to like kill and click and kill without 2-3 turn setups, there's characters for you with that for you. So yeah, it's always walking a line, but I think the danger is on both sides of that line, right? The danger is creating too much complexity, and the other danger is like not having enough, actual nutrition in there to like sustain you from the meal. So yeah, it's something Chris and I talk about. We argue about, we debate, and the designers here, working on it, like everyone has their own kind of like inclination, but we're always trying to kind of, our audience is big enough that it's hard to do something that is universally loved by everyone. So we try to do a mix and try to stay within the envelope of like still keeping the game true to what it is.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point too, because I don't know if it just ended up this way, but like you release someone in this DLC, like the Duelist, who is, I would say, the most complex character in this game, like bar none.
Yeah.
And then you have Crusader, who's just like old reliable. It's just he's very straightforward. He doesn't have like radiance and holy tokens to throw around. It's just all basic stuff, but he's easy to pilot.
Yeah.
All right. And then last question for Chris before we hop into the lightning round, and that is from good friend Thick Veiny Sausage asking, how did you develop your unique art style over time? And are there other art styles that you have a love or a fondness for that maybe you don't draw?
I love a lot of different art styles. I think sometimes it's overwhelming how talented people are online, and it depresses me, and I have to take a break. But everything from anime straight through to like real brushy fantasy stuff that's a little bit more abstract. Yeah, like I think when you like art, you should try to like as much art as you can, because even if you don't practice in all of those styles, there's something to learn and something to appreciate in a lot of it. As for the way Darkest Dungeon looks, that was by design. I was doing concept art in whatever style the projects that I would work on would need me to do. So I did kids stuff that was softer and very colorful. I did some AAA, but for Disney Pirates stuff that was kind of more normally or realistically textured, but with some exaggerated shapes. So it was a little bit more kind of like T for teen. I've drawn in all kinds of styles over the course of my career, and I don't think I'm truly exceptional at any one thing. I think that for whatever reason, I ended up a bit of a jack of all trades for a while. So for Darkest Dungeon, I looked at reference and adapted my work to fit what I felt like the game needed, which is really the root of what Tyler was saying about how the bosses are imagined, and it's kind of the heart of our partnership, quite frankly. I was trying to express this game idea visually while he was trying to express it mechanically, but we were both, it's a different language, but we're describing the same core kind of creative truth. And so I looked at Guy Davis, I looked at Mike Mignola, I looked at like medieval woodcuts, I looked at like old Bible pages, like all of that stuff, and then kind of stopped looking at that stuff and worked it down into something that felt like comic booky but old, but kind of neat. I took a lot of superhero influence for the heroes, because I wanted to do low fantasy, but I didn't want to do low fantasy where everybody's just sepia and covered in mud, because they're kind of forgettable. I still want like punchy, memorable character designs in there. They don't have eyes because it's kind of like this hopeless, like shadowed world. Everything is like dark and sucking the light out of everything. All those are deliberate decisions, and they're my attempts to really describe, the vision of the game itself. The same way the affliction system and the balancing and the tuning behind that is describing the same thing, just with numbers in a different way. And if we were to do a new game, obviously I've been doing this for 10 years. So, I mean, not using a black ink brush in Photoshop might feel really weird, because I'm just used to it now. But I would start that process again and just make sure that, okay, what is this new game about? What does it want to look like? Like, what is the best way to visually describe this new game and its core identity? The same way we'd be thinking about genre and format and all the rest. So I think when it comes to art in games, the closer you tie the art to the core creative message of the game, the more successful it is. And I think that way about the design side too. I know Tyler does. That's why we get along.
Okay, love to hear it. Thank you for all of the in-depth, fantastic answers. And now I'm going to challenge you in the hardest way possible.
For questions.
Hold on, we got one more. We got some lightning round to make your life hard. All right. So these are mostly binary questions or single word answers, and it's okay if you don't think. I encourage you not to think. Turn your brain off and just say whatever
Finally.
pops up first? I'm going to start with Tyler.
Turning
You're
my
on the hot
brain off
seat.
is really hard. I'm an overthinker.
All right. Here we go. As I said, I'm starting with Tyler. I got like, I think 7. First one. Socks with sandals.
No.
Okay. Worst thing you've ever spent money on?
A hanger.
Okay. Would you rather be the DM or the player?
Player.
What's the best season?
Fall.
Good choice. And then I know you talked about it earlier, but favorite aircraft?
I love that there's 4 seasons and I had to
Mhm.
that's a long thought for only 4 seasons. Favorite aircraft? P-47 Thunderbolt.
Okay. That was me like the F-16 or something. All right. Do you skip leg day?
I'm a World War II guy.
Okay. Yeah. Do you skip leg day?
Hell no. I'm a sprinter. I like leg day.
Okay.
And I
Bees.
got tiny arms. What?
Final question. Bees.
Bees?
Yes.
Bees? Chris gets it.
Oh,
Bees?
I didn't.
Arrested Development joke.
Okay. All right. Congratulations. Got an A+. Close it out.
You nailed it.
Yep.
Yay. Those were better than I was worried about. I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just trying to keep it fun, but honestly, all your points came from choosing fall because that is the best season scientifically.
Agreed.
All right. Chris, you get different questions.
Awesome.
First one, dogs.
Yeah.
Sunrise or sunset?
Sunset.
Is the book better than the movie?
Ooh.
Yes, except for V for Vendetta.
Okay. Best fish?
Sockeye salmon.
Overlap question. What is the worst thing you spent money on?
A rooftop camper that goes on top of your Jeep on the Thule bars that you can sleep in. That was very important to my wife, very intensely, and required an inordinate amount of effort to set up and use, and then leaked on the first night.
And you know they made those. All right. What is your final meal?
Steak, fries, red wine, asparagus, more red wine, and then like sorbet,
What flavor sorbet?
something citrus, and then a coffee with whiskey in the coffee because I want to be a little lit before the end.
The asparagus is a smart choice because you don't have to be around for that smell.
I process it pretty well. I don't.
All right. Final question. Was anime a mistake?
No.
All right. We'll end it there. Mr. Bourassa, Mr. Sigman, thanks for hanging out. Greatly appreciate it. And any final parting wisdom before we're out here?
I mean, we usually try to say it at the end of every interview, but it doesn't mean that we don't mean it. We're very grateful to have a community. This has been a crazy, I mean, you just have to read a few articles about how insane this year has been. In a year of like unprecedented large releases, we've had an unprecedented amount of layoffs, and it's been very, very hard for studios. So we're just eternally grateful to have a community that responds to our work and enjoys the stuff that we're making. So we're just happy that people are out there playing the game and picking up the DLC and watching your videos and just participating in the ecosystem around the game. Is very validating, and we recognize not a given. That doesn't mean that we're going to listen to every bit of feedback we get, but we're glad that it's being given,
Yeah.
We'll listen to it. We won't necessarily act on it, but yeah,
that's
that's good. Yeah. It's been a rough year in video games, and one of the greatest tragedies there is there's a lot of great games that have come out. Some really great games that have just, slid under the radar because of how much competition there is, and we're super lucky, like Chris said. And the other thing I'd say is, like we were talking earlier about the team. Chris and I get to be the talking heads a lot and get to do interviews and stuff like that. But hey, if you love the game, take a moment, pull up the credits and look. Everyone here got hired because they wanted to work on Darkest Dungeon, and they love it, and they've done great work. And so take a look at those names, and even just in your head, give a little thanks to those people.
Okay, love to hear it. That's it for us. The Binding Blade DLC is out this week. I believe Darkest Dungeon 2 is also on sale on Steam. I'm not sure about Epic. And consoles soon TM. And as always, thank you again. And we'll see y'all next time.
Thanks, Shuffle.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.